with regard to the IEP document. I think there's 5 key things that we really wanted to touch on. One of them is the notes page of the IEP. And that really just delineates what happened during the IEP meeting. It documents what occurred with the discussions, what the outcomes of those discussions were, what the decisions are, things like that. The tricky part about this is that it's not technically a required part of the IEP meeting. And yet, in my experience, I find it to be one of the most valuable parts of the IEP because it also often has a lot of the information about kind of the back and forth and discussion and the important pieces that the team talked about during the meeting. So that's one area that I think is really important to keep in mind and to pay attention to. And as you're looking over the IEP and reviewing it, making sure that those notes reflect what was actually said in the meeting. Sometimes the notes get misinterpreted or written down incorrectly. The word not gets inserted or missed or something like that. That's real simple, actual typo, but could be a problem if it's inaccurate. And sometimes the person who's writing them down has a different interpretation than you did as a parent in that meeting. And so making sure that the document is actually reflecting what you recall of the meeting is really important. I think one of the other things that is important to know is that you'll sometimes hear kind of, well, we don't do that, or, that's not something that we can do or provide. And one of the responses that I encourage is, okay, can you, show me the policy? Can you show me your district policy on that so that you can better understand what is it really that's preventing them from being able to do whatever it is you're asking? Now, sometimes there actually is a policy around that. Sometimes, it's something important, then that it helps give you information and you can learn from it and figure out what to do then. Sometimes there's not really a written policy and it's just information that's kind of been passed down from the higher ups that usually was aligned with a law when it first started, but sometimes as it gets translated over time, isn't always as aligned as it used to be. And so finding out what is that policy and is it something that's in writing or is it just a kind of this is the way we're used to doing things can be a helpful tool for parents as well. Another piece is requesting that draft IEP. And again, not all districts or schools will provide an entire IEP draft. They want to be cautious about not predetermining services and writing up stuff before the IEP team has discussed it, and that's appropriate. It should be an IEP team decision, so that discussion needs to happen, but they can write a draft and will often give you a copy of draft goals at a minimum so that you can review them ahead of time, prepare questions, and be ready for discussion around those at the IEP meeting. And additionally, I think one of the other things that can be really helpful is requesting a copy of the assessment ahead of time. So you've had initial, especially the first IEP, you've had initial assessments, asking for copies of those reports 4 or 5 days ahead of the IEP meeting can be really helpful so that you have time to review the information, really process it, understand it, take notes, write out your questions ahead of time so that when you get to the IEP meeting, you're prepared with your questions and can go into the meeting with the questions that you have and looking at, how does this information in this report relate to my child's need and what does that look like in the classroom with regard to services or supports, and be able to kind of connect those items that way. I think the last thing I want to touch on with this is you are an essential member of the IEP team. Okay, the team is the district and school personnel. It's also the parents and the family and whomever you choose to bring with you. And it's important to remember that you do have power in these meetings, that you are a key player, and what you say and feel and need and desire for your child is really important. And so I encourage you to say what you feel is needed and to really talk about your child from what you know, as well as listening to the team and see what you can do to collaboratively come to an agreement of what types of supports and services are really going to meet your child's needs. But keep in mind, you do have power in those meetings. It doesn't always feel like it because sometimes it feels like these lopsided sides, but it shouldn't be sides at all because it's really designed to be a team approach. So keep that in mind, that you have some power in this meeting. You can choose to say yes or no to things, and there are ways to follow up with that as well.